You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Jerome Corsi. Today it's Monday. It's December 8th, 2025. And again, you'll see my bookcases are empty. I'm moving. The divorce is final, and I'll be relocating. And my wife of 25 years decided to have an affair. Didn't want me to be in politics any longer. So I guess God took her out of my life, and I'm going to continue in politics. The major subject I want to talk today about is Ukraine. And it looks like over the weekend, this 28-point plan that President Trump advanced to settle the war was largely rejected, mostly by the EU and Zelensky. And so Zelensky is now, he's at Downing Street. He's trying to get together a coalition of the willing, namely France, Germany, and maybe the UK or some other nutcase country in Europe, to go against Russia and to try to retake the territory that Russia has taken. Now, Trump has realized, I think, one fundamental fact about the Ukraine war, and that is that Russia's won. Ukraine has lost. And Russia has no real reason to settle at this point, because Russia can take, in military terms, the remaining parts of Donbass that Russia wants. It's an industrial-rich part of the Russian-speaking territory on the eastern part of Ukraine that has been traditionally aligned with Russia. And Putin has only between 12 to maybe 20% of Donbass yet to take. But the key military positions Ukraine has held have fallen. So now it's a matter of time. I mean, truthfully, if Putin wanted to, he could march right into Kiev. And I don't see any way Ukraine can stop him, short of weapons that Ukraine does not have. Now, the Europeans are desperate to keep the war going for a variety of reasons. Namely, their economies are so close to complete collapse, especially Germany and France, which have gone through with this net zero nonsense and begun to de-industrialize, especially Germany. Germany actually destroyed 3 nuclear power plants, which is insanity. It's Germany's cost of electricity in France and the UK this winter are going to skyrocket, especially if they continue to impose sanctions on Russia. Now, with Russia determined to win the war, and these countries determined to continue fighting, Donald Trump's had enough. Donald Trump's understood that the General Kellogg, who wanted to give Tomahawk missiles to Zelensky, would only, our long-range cruise missiles that are nuclear capable, would only cause World War III. And that increasing the cost to Russia of continuing the war, Russia's made it clear that there's no tolerance in Russia for a long continued war. Russia would not hesitate at some point or other to use nuclear weapons, even if they were to use low-grade nuclear weapons, to make simple the annihilation of any foreign forces that enter into Ukraine to try to bolster Zelensky's regime. Over the weekend also, Zelensky got badgered by revelations of corruption, which led his number 2 to resign and flee the country. The regime's exposure to this massive corruption is, I think, crippling for Zelensky's credibility in the world. And Zelensky is fighting a losing cause. I think the world is sick and tired of this little guy running around in his military fatigues, acting as if he can beat Russia. With corruption at the center of everything Ukraine is about, I think we're seeing that the continuation of the Russian collusion narrative against Trump is now morphing into this coalition of the willing to fight, continue the fight in Ukraine against Russia, the willing being France, Germany, and the UK. Now, this coalition of the willing is about as capable of launching a military threat to Russia as they are. I think they'd be better off trying to run a transgender woke parade, military parade down the Champs-Elysees than to fight in Ukraine. They don't speak the same language. They haven't fought a war for decades. Their military are completely untried in the battlefield. And it's a joke because all three of these countries have gone into deep infiltration by Islam. They're at a border point where Islam is ready to, I think, assert and try to establish Sharia law in several of the EU countries. Now, Donald Trump's had enough of it. Donald Trump has said basically that he's sick and tired of putting money into a war that's going nowhere. And that, the idea of denying Russia access to the Crimea, which has Sevastopol, Russia's major naval port on the Black Sea, is ludicrous. And the whole narrative going back to Victoria Nuland and all those people, the State Department, the color revolutions that now General Flynn is talking about in the United States that were going on through the Obama years with the color revolutions sweeping North Africa and then into Ukraine to try to overthrow governments. When Yanukovych was overthrown, and by the way, that was, one that it was very much aligned with Russia, trying to stabilize the relationships between Germany and Russia and their influence on Ukraine. And Yanukovych was a duly elected president. The Maidan rebellion overthrew him. Hillary Clinton had her server going, private email server, and Bill Clinton was running a scam game with the Clinton Foundation, collecting money from Pinochet, an oligarch in Ukraine in the 2013 period of time. So this whole thing is a lying narrative that is coming to an end because simply the countries in Europe can't afford to launch the kind of war that would be effective. They want the proxy war to continue because they're under this illusion that if they simply boosted their economy with war munitions, that they would take themselves out of the deep depression into which they are sliding quickly. So again, I think you see the fundamental collapse of the Ukraine narrative, which I think is in its final death throes. Pretty soon you'll see both Obama and Nuland and all the rest of the pro go after Russia group realizing that they're facing increasingly criminal investigation, and that the idea that they've launched a effective policy for the United States in the future in Europe is dead. President Trump, together with his new strategic national security analysis that was released by Pete Hegseth just in the past few days, it made it clear return to what he was talking about in 2016, which is establishing working relations with Russia rather than viewing Russia as an enemy and as a foe that's going to overtake Europe. The real threat is that Europeans will wake up one day and find out that Muslims are ready to overtake Europe, and it isn't Russia that's going to be invading again with the Soviet troops like they did in the 1950s. And NATO is, if Trump's given NATO 2 years to manage itself, to fund itself, or he's pulling out. And I think he'll do the same eventually with the United Nations. I think Trump is sick of the globalists, as I think most right-thinking Americans are, because they lead to this woke surrender to an Orwellian future, which is upon us more every day as we get into digital IDs and AI and data centers. The amount of data that we're going to be able to collect on individuals in the coming years is frightening. It's got to be carefully controlled. I don't know whether we'll have the wisdom to control it, including AI. So, Chris, if you want to come on, these are issues that we can discuss for a minute. I want to get your views on it. And just, I think Russia has a better handle on controlling Islam right now than Europe does by far.
Well, I guess the Soviet Union had its experience in that department for a while. I mean, first off, um, Russia had well, the Soviet Union for a long time has suppressed religion altogether. But I guess they kind of knew that there was some subversion within the Islamic community when it came to the plan as dictated by their religion to spread Islam throughout the world. On one hand, there's the liberals who are going to say, "Well, that's okay. It's nice that the Islamists are doing something nice." The fact is, though, they believe they're right in killing infidels. They believe they're right in taking over countries, and you see what's happening right here in America. And in fact, the Democrats concentrated Muslim communities together, like the Somalis, so they can gain power within our government.
Also, so they can steal money.
Right, steal money. Well, that's part of it. They gain power within the government. They steal money
Yeah, the
in
Democrat,
return.
the
Right, in
Democratic
return,
Party can't survive unless it steals money.
and in
It's got
return,
steal elections, cheat, lie, create these narratives,
money for
and
votes. Money for votes.
well, and also, but I mean, they're taking money from the border.
Right.
The deal that was made with Honduras in 2014.
Yes.
They're funding the Democratic Party through child labor, through child sex trade, through child organ harvesting, through cocaine, and through fentanyl. And Communist China's been at the center of Obama Biden's policy to destroy America.
And if you look even further into this, it's not just the Muslim community, but I remember the big fight about what was it about PBS, the big fight about Planned Parenthood over the many years. Planned Parenthood kicks back a lot of money to Democrats when they get a huge amount from Democrat-run Congress. They get loads of money coming in, hundreds of millions, and a lot of that, maybe not directly, but the fact is, Democrats in turn get money from Planned Parenthood and the higher ups within. Same thing with PBS. They get a lot of money from the Democrats, but great coverage. It's basically political power and votes for money, and of course campaign fundage. I'm sure a lot of that money the Somalis stole are filtering back to Democrats somehow too.
No doubt
Most
about
likely
it.
Democrats within that community.
Well, look at Tim Walz.
Right.
How much money has he gotten from stealing of the government money? How
Which
much money is stolen from Medicare? How much money do the Democrats steal from every program that they've created? The food stamp program, SNAP.
Yeah, and now the fact that he acts like a stooge most of the time, he thinks playing dumb will let him get away with everything that happened. I don't think this guy didn't know at all what was happening with the Somalis and the COVID money. I think he knew everything. I believe he helped cover it up. And again, I'm making an accusation here, and I'm only the producer. But I don't think Tim Walz is as stupid as he's playing out to be. I believe he's as corrupt as we think he is.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think from beginning now, Trump is done with Europe, and Trump is sick and tired of the European righteousness, the EU, and it's time for Trump to start making individual deals with individual countries in the EU, and not with the EU as a whole. So, for instance, Hungary deserves our support.
Yes.
I think to some extent, Italy deserves our support. And they need to close their borders to this Islamic invasion and to do what we're doing, that is to clear out those who do not belong in the country as they're not citizens. And so these are things that are, essentially going to be the next wave of U.S. policy in Europe, which is to move away from NATO and to move away from the EU, to move away from the United Nations, all of which I think are failed institutions.
Absolutely. They've been failures for a long time. The UN's a nice place for countries to sit together, have a few coffees, and talk, but they got too powerful, or they claimed to be as more powerful than they are, and they were striving towards that one world government. They found a way, by the way, with the World Health Organization pact that Biden signed us onto at one point. Now, while Trump rescinded that, the fact is a lot of nations are going to be falling under that, and many of them, of course, the free world in Europe and Canada. So yes, The UN does have a lot of control, and they will wield that when they can. But
Well, if we look at the economics right now, take a look at gold and silver. Gold today is at $4,220.60 an ounce, and silver is at $58.34 an ounce. Now, again, these are indications that the world economic powers that be understand that the debt ratios in Europe and the United States are not sustainable. And that, in fact, the only way we can prolong, the seemingly boom time is by continuing to spend money we don't have. And therefore, at some point or other, these trillion-dollar deficits become such a burden that there's no way we can continue to spend our way into prosperity with money we don't have. So I think the trend is going to be for even the average person now to be able to make money by buying silver. And we're going to change fundamentally Corsi Nation over the next few weeks and months as I move and reestablish my life and my career. We're going to be doing different things with this. And one of the things we're going to be doing is finding ways for middle-class citizens, not just the wealthy, to benefit from gold and silver as they're appreciating. Because Swiss America, I think, is a leader in figuring out innovative ways for the average person to be able to benefit. And I'm pointing people again to the Corsi Nation page on gold and silver, where we indicate that this Walking Liberty $50 offer is available. For people in first-time contact with Swiss America can buy up to 250 these Walking Liberty coins, which are almost pure silver, and are going to advance faster percentage-wise than gold, because silver is going to go a lot quicker to $100 an ounce, doubling, than gold is going to go to $8,000 an ounce, doubling. And, double the money is, whether you're doubling, a smaller amount of money or a bigger amount of money, double is still twice as what you invested. And so therefore, there's strategies here that can be put together, I believe, that we're going to champion for middle-class people to benefit from this gold rush that's coming on quickly. Okay, I want to cover a couple more stories that are circulating at the beginning of this week that I think will develop throughout the week to be pretty significant. The changes going on in South America, first of all, I do think we're very close to invading Venezuela. I think that could happen almost any day now. And Trump is no longer caring what the Democrats say. Trump is now marginalizing the Democrats to the point where they are supporting only releasing criminals, supporting radical Islam, supporting drug dealers, supporting Muslims. I mean, the Democratic Party is really self-imploding. And the whole idea of the Democrats winning another election unless they can cheat and steal is unimaginable. So therefore, you've now got the Trump administration beginning to launch a public relations offensive in which they're letting the American people know just how corrupt our election system is. I was going to turn back here to some of my books, pointing out that, when I talked about the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, I think that book was instrumental in showing that the climate debate by the left was complete nonsense. It was politics. It was not science. Of course, I realize my books are all packed up to be moved, so it isn't here that I can show. The same with the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. What we're really fighting here is the left's war on truth. The left wants to have constructed reality of their own narrative, which is not in keeping with reality. So the idea that Europe can keep Ukraine armed without U.S. aid is simply pathetic. as soon as Trump pulls out, the World Economic Forum, the whole structure of this globalist Europe and the EU collapses. If the United States doesn't prop up the EU is nothing but a squabbling group of conflicting nations that have never, for thousands of years, agreed with each other. And it's still not the case. They're now all getting dominated by Islamic cultures that they invited to come to the country and are ready to take over. So there's no way, I believe, that the United States has, throughout 2025, substantially diminished our support to Ukraine, which was strong during the Obama-Biden years, but now is dwindling. And as it goes down to zero, Europe is going to find out that without the United States support, Europe is a failed enterprise that is fundamentally nothing more than the Fourth Reich idea that the EU could be put together by a group of unelected bureaucrats working with multinational corporations to create a globalist world that was fundamentally racist and fundamentally aimed at depopulation. So we're seeing, and by the way, the Gaza is ready to enter the next phase of demilitarization. And I think this is going to be another test to see if Hamas can be driven once and for all out of Gaza. And it's going to be another test of Trump's vision, which is establishing peace through the world through prosperity, not through war. War only permits and develops the next war. It does not lead to prosperity. Okay, so if people have prosperity, they're much more likely to work together and not go to war against each other. That's a lesson the human species has got to yet learn. In the meantime, we're finding throughout the United States that, I'm seeing Mandami now is giving instructions as how to avoid ICE. So he's posting video coaching illegals on how to evade ICE. He's urging people to stand up to the feds. Well, Mandami better watch out because he's going to be committing crimes pretty soon. If he wants to resist ICE, he can be charged with criminal violations of national policy. The same with this Ilhan Omar, who's saying that Trump has an unhealthy and creepy obsession with her and Somalis are victims of welfare fraud schemes, that we also could have benefited from money that was stolen. I mean, she's saying, the money was stolen from them too. And meanwhile, Waltz is under increased fire as Minnesota Disability Services pauses licensing after a 283% increase in new licensing applications, but only a 25% increase in participants. So I think even Minnesota is catching on to Waltz and the schemes and the lies and the cheating and the stealing. I'm also finding in the media that the media is losing rapidly, mainstream media, money and attention of the American people. So as we now see the focus turning on Somalia and the scams will also include Medicare, Medicaid, they'll include SNAP. Anywhere money was put into the government programs in massive quantities, the Democrats were stealing it to fund Antifa and Black Lives Matter to destroy America. And I think that is becoming abundantly clear. American people going into 2026, I think Trump will demand an executive order that will have voter IDs and proof of citizenship to vote and getting rid of the machines, limiting mail-in ballots to the traditional absentee ballot, which is much more tightly controlled. And by the way, after the EU hit Musk with a $140 million censorship fine over X, Musk is now saying that the EU must be dismantled. And I think Musk is probably right that the EU is waging a war against free speech In Great Britain, you can be arrested for posting something on a YouTube or an X or any kind of post that is not approved by the government. The gendarme may be knocking on your front door. So I think we're seeing a world in which we're realizing the hoaxes the Democrats have perpetrated have all been schemes that don't work, aimed at destroying capitalism in order to bring forward their new utopian one world order, one world government dystopia. And I think the project has failed. And we're just in the initial stages of the project collapsing. And again, I'm going to be doing some additional writing here, proposing the idea that we need to abandon NATO now. And we need to begin thinking about abandoning the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and all these other globalist schemes. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up?
We'll just keep an eye on what's going on around here and around the world. Yeah, the globalists are trying their best once again. They haven't given up after losing out pretty much last year. Their aim is still to push their agenda by 2030. If you look around, the smart cities experiment, the 15-minute cities experiment, is still going strong. There's the continued fight in Manhattan over congestion pricing. Hochul decided that she didn't want to bump it up for the Christmas season, but that's still an argument. Now California is looking at congestion pricing in some parts of their cities. And again, these are select parts where generally richer people live, and you can kind of concentrate them and create a bubble out of them. That's not going to be the first time. There are cities all over the country that are looking at this, especially the blue ones. So,
well, I think all these projects are going to fail.
Yes.
And they're going to fail massively. And I don't believe the American people are ready yet to be conned into self-destruction. And the Obama, Biden, Clinton, World Economic Forum attempt to engineer us into oblivion, I think, has failed and is failing massively. And Zelensky, I believe, will soon be outed as a illegitimate president of Ukraine, and the EU will be left standing naked in its promises to help Zelensky beat Russia. I expect Russia will end this war within a matter of months and will proclaim that the territory that they've taken from Ukraine will not be returned, and there'll be nothing the world can do about it. Personally, I think this will be a victory defeating the forces of Victoria Nuland and the others who still control the State Department, they still control the Department of Justice and many other departments, as Trump begins to consider moving the bureaucracy out of Washington in order to get rid of these legacy employees. It's the only way to do it. Move them to locations which are not particularly attractive. Death Valley is at the top of my list.
Death Valley, or maybe I don't know, Northern Nevada. There we go. Death Valley, somewhere else in Northern Nevada. There we go.
Anywhere that
Lab City,
anywhere where they can't get a triple espresso at a Georgetown coffee shop.
That's not bad. How about I don't know, upper Montana. There we go.
Yeah, all right.
Not a lot over there, and the Democrats would be afraid to go there anyway. So that works.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up today. Today is Monday. It's December 8th. It's a week in which I'm going to be moving. I'll be doing broadcasts on Corsi Nation, but they'll be revamped in next year with some different formats. And I'm very much looking forward to this next phase of my career, next phase of where we're going with Corsi Nation and with God's Five Stones, which is gaining again in contributions as we're preparing for a new series of investigations of Act Blue, corruption of the Democrats. I think we have an opportunity here with Donald Trump to support an organized campaign to make the American public aware of just how much election fraud the Democrats have engaged in as preparatory to an executive order, which the Democrats will scream and howl over, may even involve the decision to use Article 2 powers as commander-in-chief to have the military run some of the elections in democratic states. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. I encourage you to join us in Second Chronicles 7:14. Let's get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for letting the world get to this point of anti-Christianity. If we do this, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Thank you for joining us on CorsiNation.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday, and we'll be back tomorrow. God bless.